There, red light's on. It's recording. It's recording. Red light's on.
Okay, Dwayne, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm Dwayne Starr, and I worked for the company 24 years. I was originally worked in the service department in the Omaha branch. Spent most of my time in Omaha. I became the branch service manager and then the Western Division service manager. Last I worked was in Coldwater, Ohio, as the product training manager for North America, so my career expanded quite a bit. But I was always at the branch level. I did spend 6 months in Charles City at one time running a service operation. We had a dealer in Charles City that sold his business, and we had customers in the Charles City area without service, and so I got assigned the duty to go back over and take care of that. So that's the limit of my Charles City experience.
Hello, I'm Clifford Kelly. Anybody that can't hear me while I'm talking, just raise your arm or something. Okay. Ice cream cone. Well, I'll try to remember that. I worked there from January 22nd of 1972 to May, I think, 14 of 1982. So about 10 years, and I worked as a maintenance electrician. And I was in every area of the plant and foundry, top to bottom and side to side at different times. And that included working under Gladys Gregg's light was under the desk of the switchboard, and from the tunnels down underneath the plant to the foundry, from the top of the cupolas to the burger valve and the lids to everywhere in between. In the wintertime in the foundry, it seemed like I would be assigned down there. Somebody had figured out that I apparently liked that, which I didn't, but I'd be sent up on the roof to get all the heaters running. Went out day after day after day through the foundry in the wintertime. In the daytime, they didn't care. They were producing a lot of heat. But we worked on them on third shift in the wintertime. That's where I learned to drink hot tea, which converted to coffee.
Thank you. My name's Dean Jayden. I started with the White Farm in 1974. I worked in the factory service department. At one time I worked for Dwayne out of the Omaha branch, and I had various positions. They kept shuffling me around. I was very fortunate. I guess my next position was I was the head test engineer that took the tractors to Nebraska for the Lincoln Nebraska tractor tests. That was very rewarding. That was during the 100 series tractors, the ones with the Cummins engines, and we really had a good time on that. My last position, I was over factory maintenance supervisor, a crew of about 30 guys that, I don't know, most of the time tried to hide from me, I guess, except when I needed to buy coffee. But very fortunate, was there till the plant closed in 1993, so but got to be exposed to many different things from when I was working for Dwayne out in the retail level, and I never was involved in manufacturing until that last position. A very enlightening career with them. 74 to 93. When I started there, I was right at 3,000 employees in Charles City, and I always tell people, Charles City is a town of 10,000. There was 30-some bars. There was a happy hour every 8 hours. Every shift that got out, happy hour started. So it was a boom town at that time.
Bill Martinson, and I worked in the engineering department from 1970 to 75. And so I went right to Hopkins, because in 70 they were merging engineering into Hopkins. So at the time I started mid-year, Charles City engineers are being moved up. My first assignment was the A4T, which was the Minneapolis name for the 2255, the articulated tractor, and that had just gone into production a few months before. So it was two things. One was supporting current product. The second thing is we're working on a high horsepower version that consisted of a new transmission that would take the horsepower and a turbo at 585. And then when the Lake Street plant was closed in, I think, 72, that was basically the end of the Minneapolis Marine product line. So the A4T project ended, and I got moved over to the 2255 and worked under John Rex, a great guy, and then he left before the tractor got into production, and so I kind of finished it off. And then after that, and I know Dean knows what I'm talking about here, they started this F30, F60 project.
Oh.
You heard about that, I think.
Yes, very much.
And when the corporate tractor was killed, there was this big hole in there, and so that's what the F30 and F60 was about. 130, future 130 and future 160 horsepower. And I was working on the cab part of that. But then they wanted to get the white line going, so we took the cab that we were working on for this F30, F60, brought in Kremlo and said, adapt that basic style to the current platform, which then went on to 2105 and 2150 and 285. And that style stayed, you know, but they evolved the cab quite a bit, I think. So, but then the other part I need to say is this: having engineering in Hopkins was unstable. He moved up all those Charles City guys, and when they closed Lake Street, the factory was in Charles City and engineering was in Hopkins. And so in my 5 years there were, I believe, 3 announced moves. 2 of them were to Charles City, and neither one happened because they didn't have any place to put us, and they didn't have money to move us. And then finally, when Bunky Knudsen took over, then he decided everything would go to Chicago, and engineering had moved to Libertyville, and I think they brought all of farm, the implement and combine. I thought they were consolidating all of engineering there, but we didn't go. A lot of us, they lost a lot of talent through that fooling around of those announced moves, and that's when I left. So I say that the company left me, I didn't leave it.
Questions? Thank you.
I think we should have someone, if you want to ask questions, go around with the mic. There you go, so we can all hear the questions.
Buddy? I can make a comment about, well, there's a question.
I'm Marvin Leaders from Omaha. Am I close enough? Okay. I'm Marvin Leaders from Omaha. Do you have, any of you have any background or previous knowledge of injecting water, like on a 2850, you see what I'm saying, into the air system to somewhat alleviate the knock from kerosene? You see what I'm saying? But there was a tank down to the left side of the platform. The pictures that I see, I believe they were just trying to draw that water up and put it into the airstream. You see, on our Rumley oil pools, they had a mechanical pump to bring it up into their carburetor. And I just was wondering, you see what I'm saying, you know, talking with old collectors and whatever, kind of what was the history of that. Rumley did a lot. On my 2040, when it went through Nebraska Cast, was burning more water on Nebraska Cast on the maximum pull than it was kerosene. They were dousing that hard with water in through that carburetor. I just wanted to see what I'm saying. Older collectors have knowledge, you see, of what Park Power was doing. Well, I know.
All right, the question was, did any of the 4 of us have any working knowledge of water added to the fuel to control detonation and increase horsepower. One of the members that we had hoped to have here was Wayne Wilsey, and he would have been very qualified to address that. The only experience I have is I have my grandfather's Rumley oil pull, and that system, as you addressed, used equal amounts of water and sometimes greater under hard pull to control detonation. And it was a crude system that you had to stand there and turn the needles on the fuel you was burning, which would have been oftentimes a much cruder version than even kerosene, and water. It was a mechanical system, like you said, to draw it up into the separate chambers of what we call today was a carburetor, but was much cruder than that. But it worked, and of course, a tidbit, which wasn't in the question, but Rumley was a steam engine company before they made internal gas, and I guess the rumor we've heard through the years, confirmed or not, was that Rumley got a hold of a Hart-Parr tractor, and a lot of the early Rumley engines are nearly indistinguishable from Hart-Parr. But Hart-Parr also used water in some of their early models to do the same thing. And of course, water was used in fighter planes and a variety of other things for detonation control. But we don't have the member here that could have really addressed that with Hart-Parr. Next question.
Bill referred to the F-30 and F-60 tractor, and I just want to clarify what that was the prototype series of what is the 2135 and 2155, 2180 tractors. And that drivetrain stayed with the White Farm line right to the end. I mean, you look at that 4210 out here, basically that's the same planetary final drive as what was developed in the F-30 and F-60 tractors. And the cab, I can attest to that. Once that cab was developed, there was no more rollover protective structure testing done on that because it was the same ROP structure, in other words, rollover protection that was originally developed from the F-30 and F-60 tractors. So that was quite a major step, and that cab was originally built by Crenlow, but then in the late 80s, well, it was in, I'd say, you remember, Cliff, it was about 82 or 3 maybe early 80s. They moved that production to Charles City, and we were making the cabs in Charles City.
That was moved in the 70s. The cab manufacturing.
It was?
Yes.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Late 70s.
Dean handed me the microphone. It's going back pretty quick, but Dean can talk about an issue. Anybody wonder why the outboard planetaries existed in the first place? It was because the rear end casting would flex. It wouldn't break, but it flexed so much they couldn't keep the bull gears in contact with the pinion gears. And I think Dean was involved in some testing on that.
Well, not so much on the outboard planetaries. That came along and was originally introduced in the 20 and 2150 tractors. That were, you know, they had, what that transmission case was, it was, we called it the Barnes line transmission. It was a transfer line that was developed for the 18 and 1900s. And, well, even forerunner to that, it was very similar, but the tooling for that, and it was a bull gear reduction, but it couldn't stand that massive amount of torque going through just that bull pinion and pinion. So what they did is they spun everything a lot faster. If you know, you guys have all had them apart. You take a 2255 apart and think, how's them little bull gears going to stand up? But you've got to remember that's spinning at 4 times the speed.
Yeah, the gaskets wouldn't hold.
Yeah, they were.
On the hydraulic
Yeah, the hydraulic housing, and probably Dwayne can attest to that. You got good pulling 50 series tractor.
I remember being at one of our dealers had a 2150. He had turned the fuel up on it so far, and the side of the transmission case had flexed so much, you know, the wheels were trying to get ahead of the tractor. It had cracked the housing on it in the transmission while we're running down the side of it. I don't think that was quite warranty, was it?
Yeah. Just speak it up, or holler it out, and we'll repeat the question.
Now that we've got the test car in Floyd County, I'd like to, if any of you can address all the things that were tested out there on the test track and what they did. I thought that was interesting, some of the things that they tried to do. I've seen movies where they're jumping over railroad ties and all kinds of things, load testing and whatnot. If you could do that, appreciate it. I was at the Floyd County Museum and was really excited to get that car, and I appreciate all the donations that you people put out, the HPOCA, to get that. But what that test car did is it wasn't used in like bump tests or anything. It was used to measure drawbar horsepower. And there was a hydraulic cylinder on the front of that it just was a slip-fit cylinder, so it was always leaking. There was a catch tray underneath that, and that what you were doing is compressing oil in there so you could measure the pressure in that cylinder and then convert that to pounds of pull. And that pounds of pull, then you could inversely convert to drawbar horsepower. You'd take the drawbar pull pounds, and there was a formula. We had all that stuff in the test car, but the test car was like a mobile office. We not only measured drawbar pull, we would measure wheel slip, which they had wheel counters on the wheels, and we knew the length of the track that we were going over, so we could calculate, you know, how much percent slip we were having. We also controlled fuel temperature. We would have a separate tank on there, so we were monitoring the fuel temperature at all times. What we were attempting to do there was replicate the data that we wanted to have happen at Nebraska. And this was also used in just endurance tests on the tractor too, but behind that test car, we would attach, in the earlier years, you'll see pictures, and I'll have one tonight at the banquet, where what they would do is hook tractors behind it, and they put a restriction, just a valve on the exhaust manifold, and they make that tractor just, they unhook the